TopLobsta Productions.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is TopLobsta, the father of disinformation.
I was watching you for a second, and you kind of like, you got stuck. I was like, is he just going to sit there looking smug, or is he going to introduce the show?
I don't know why. You know why? Sometimes I feel like the front of what I say gets cut off. Like after the intro, and then when I start speaking.
Right.
So I got to give room for it to transition, over into whatever's hat. This is all
Join the
technical stuff,
Patreon.
guys. Do that. Patreon.com//Nephilim Death Squad. You can enjoy this episode once it goes behind the paywall at the half an hour mark. And you could also engage in the live chat, enjoy an ad-free experience, and gain early access to the episode before the general public. You can do that all on patreon.com//upside down/Nephilim Death Squad. Also, guys, before we get into today's guest, we're going to play our promo for Bohemian Grove because the tickets are... What?
Okay, fine. All right.
Yeah.
We'll do it before the guest. Sorry. Hang out for a little bit.
I want to do it before the guest. I want to just sit here and watch a fucking promo for 2 minutes. Is that okay? Can I do that?
Fine. Jeez.
Fine.
Very rude.
Here. I'm going to press play on it. Here we go. Somewhere between Area 51, Comedy Central, and a really intense episode of Ancient Aliens, there exists a place.
I don't like this. Welcome to Bohemian Grove, June 20th to 21st, the Tropic, Leesburg, Florida.
Featuring performances from Tower Gang, Nephilim Death Squad,
The Bard of Band's Speech, Owen Benjamin,
Sam Tripoli.
Hosted by the Cosmic Cowboy of Consciousness himself, Shane Cashman.
You'll experience live podcasts, wild performances,
And the kind of conversations that'll get your group chats flagged by the NSA. God damn it.
Day 2 isn't just off the rails. There are no rails. Yeah, that is gay, right?
It's unfiltered, uncensored, and quite possibly a psyop, but a really fun one.
Conspiracies, comedy, chaos. At least one guy trying to sell you DMT in the parking lot.
Welcome to Bohemian Grove. 2 days. Shut up.
Bohemian Grove 3.
2 days.
1 portal.
And remember, if you don't show up,
The Jews win.
tickets are on sale now. Is it true? I think it is true that the Jews win, right?
It is true that the Jews win if you don't go to brogrove.com and pick up your tickets for the greatest event that has ever graced Florida. For sure. Maybe the East Coast, maybe the world. Brogrove.com. Go get your tickets. All right, guys. Anyway, joining us today is Austin Picard. Austin, for the audience who may not be familiar with you, what is it that you focus on and where can they find your work?
All right, guys. First of all, I appreciate you as always for having me on. You know that. And yeah, me personally, I've really started with the Underclass podcast. That was my solo creative vision as far as that project is concerned, kind of the umbrella project that most of my content, all of my content essentially goes under this umbrella. But I'm also attempting to really, the ultimate goal and priority was to spotlight kind of the true nature of the state and why I am philosophically opposed and feel much like I am among the underclass, if you will, which is the reason being why I effectively use this name, because me personally, I feel as if I'm entirely disenfranchised. I haven't felt any representation for honestly, since the veil fell to the wayside. My naive vulnerability to a lot of the misinformation and deception and smoke and mirrors that have been truly, in my mind, sophisticated at a level as far as psychological warfare tactics and techniques, really culture creation as well. So I find myself at the intersection is kind of how I've been describing it lately. where the occult meets, let's say, organized crime syndicates that run hand in hand with the intelligence apparatus and utilize plausible deniability cutouts like cult organizations and private sector entities for that exact purpose, to essentially run distractionary tactics and blow smoke and mirrors and manipulate our ability to kind of just effectively kind of interpret the true power paradigm and how it functions and plays out on a daily basis.
Interpret reality, right? I mean,
Exactly.
fuck the entire. They're in culture creation. They're in all this espionage. They're operating on the world stage, and they're manufacturing and feeding us our reality. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so my entire goal has become, and it's like, it's definitely evolved over time. It's only been, this is still, it feels so much like it's still in its infancy. Like, I started this in April of 2023, man. You know, I mean, like, this is very new still to me. And so I'm doing my best to navigate these waters as much as I possibly can. But I feel as if I'm also extremely blessed and grateful because from day one, I was provided the opportunity by Sam, obviously, Sam Tripoli from TFH, to go on tinfoil hat for my very first interview, you know, public, like as far as just publicly presenting myself, as well as my a creative vision to the public. And so that alone felt like one, obviously, as I continue to say, the law of abundance, I'm ultimately grateful for the opportunities, but also it was like, it seems like there's been this common theme of essentially, you know, jump into the deep end and sink or swim. And I think if you've disciplined yourself enough psychologically, you've accumulated enough knowledge over time in an objective way where you've tried to reinforce your core values, you know, what is fundamentally most important, what you should prioritize. Then I feel like you have kind of the defense mechanism put in its proper place to where you might be able to effectively navigate those very waters and swim, man. And when you start to swim, right, you learn the proper techniques, like you feel like the sky's the limit, you know. And I really, I'm feeling that way, and I think that you guys probably are as well. Just as far as I was just talking with you privately, David, like just surrounding ourselves with good people, like-minded individuals who have, you know, ethical principles worthwhile they're practicing in real time. And like that alone,
it's weird, isn't it? Like,
thank God.
So you and I were talking about this, and we'll get into the subject matter. Just for the audience who's listening, we're going to end up talking about the Davidians and David Koresh and Waco and all that today.
Maybe.
But before we do, there's been an interesting thing that's been developing on Twitter, which is we have found ourselves
fucking moon map, dog.
That's right. And this guy actually does have a moon map. We found ourselves in the middle of wild speculation. There are content creators. I don't know if I'd call them content creators. There are mildly popular accounts who are growing on Twitter, anonymous accounts. They're speculating heavily. Are we part of some sort of network of feds or controlled ops? The Florida Illuminati, right?
Term, bro.
Yeah.
And I was saying to Austin, what's significant about that is
it's a complicated question, right? I mean,
are we part of the Illuminati? Well, it's complicated because we're not allowed to answer.
Yeah. If I had to like really string it out, it would just be kind of confusing. But in short, yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to wrap it up. Is yes. But what's significant about that? It's not just that it's fun to have somebody schizo spiraling about you and creating conspiracies. I mean, as a conspiracy theorist, it is fun to have conspiracies about me. But what it does speak to is the fact that imagine the psychology of an individual who's going to spend a disproportionate amount of time digging up research on you. What will have sparked that? In my opinion, they are seeing us non-stop. We're in a really weird period where the old guard is dying, legacy media is rotten and falling off the vine, and many of the people who were leading the alternative media, I guess you could call it, have also been scooped up and co-opted to whatever degree. And they're kind of now situating themselves as the new established media. And that leaves another vacuum. And that vacuum is where they used to sit. So whatever this guy is doing, whatever he's seeing so much of it that he's going mad. He's like, why am I seeing these guys fucking constantly? They have to be. Why is the algorithm favoring them? There's no way you can get to this point without being backed by feds. And I don't think that that's as unique, or rather, I don't think it's that we're unique. I think it's that the time that we are in is unique, in that this old guard is dying off. There is now a power vacuum, and the bar for entry is low enough for guys like us to get in. And I don't know who did it or why it's happening. You could, make a bunch of speculations about that, but it is fascinating that to whatever degree people are seeing us, it's overwhelming enough for them to be like, this is not organic. These guys are ops. And I'm a big fan of that shit.
There's a full court press of the established media who is now dead. It seems like they're buying, or they're trying to influence other people that are in this like same space that we're in. So I think in the opposition to that, people are going to find people like us, people like Austin and Jose, people like Clint. They're going to go and look at the opposite of this stuff. So like one of the latest things the latest people who have been recruited, and they've been asking to be recruited for quite a while, and now they finally got it, but this guy's just too dumb. It's really not his fault. I blame it on race. It's just like there's like an IQ cap that he's stuck at. The guy Dom Lucre, basically selling himself to the Jews in the dumbest way possible, the most obvious and dumbest way possible. I told him just fucking clean off those dookie breads and move the seashells out of your hair before you put the little hat on. But it's like these people are being paid, and in opposition to that, people are going to look on the other side and be like, well, who's not lying? And like, we're over here, I'm not lying. I'm autistically telling the truth. So then they're going to find every time I said faggot online. So whatever.
Right. You know what's funny is when they try to throw that in your face. You could throw that in Rogan's face.
Like,
he's got this big established thing. But yeah, you can't do it to us. You'll go, yeah, that was a banger, right? It's fascinating. It goes to show you how much of a facade. What's the word? Is it an F or a V? I'm really retarded.
Facade.
Thank you.
I thought you're talking about Syria. I was like, what are you talking about?
It shows you how much of a facade the mainstream media was, the legacy media. It had this air of professionalism. It had this air of authoritative, but none of it was real, because once they go away, the power vacuum is now sucking us into it. And we're not professional. We're not authoritative. We don't have all those bells and whistles and all the certificates. We didn't go to school for this, or in an era where we were told to trust the experts. The experts have fallen apart, and the power vacuum is sucking us into it. It kind of tells me it was a fucking lie the whole time, and those people were never better than us. They were no better than us. They're exactly the same as us. They're just broken, lost people that decided to talk into a microphone, and you could put on a suit or whatever and step out in front of a crowd, and the crowd will accept you as the authority. And that was always a fucking illusion.
Absolutely. And I think that within the context of the new media landscape and how it's kind of formed, it's formed in the public eye through these, let's just say, the modernized social media platforms, which really became digital gulags, which I think were manufactured to become this by design. But I do think that this is, unfortunately, what has happened in my mind, and I'm very optimistic about this, is the fact that they expose themselves, unfortunately, due to their lack of authenticity. And I think that alone is where we're finding this very much just an eager appetite for authentic truth, and as far as just objectively pursuing the truth. So if you are willing to do something such as that, right, you have the balls to objectively pursue the truth and find yourself surrounded by enemies on all sides, because effectively that's what does tend to happen. Although just philosophically, I don't mean like ultimately, I feel like we've found our own people in many ways, and it's like-minded individuals kind of seem to flock to common ideas and common principles, and as far as embracing them. And the more that again, we discover people who are practicing this way of life, then you realize, right, that honestly, I'm coming to find that I'm not at all shocked that, let's say, a good example is meeting Jake Shields the other day, and you come to find that he's actually one of the most down-to-earth, principled individuals, such a cool and kind dude, and seemingly practicing the law of abundance, just like I mentioned with Sam, right? Which is just like the most beautiful mentality, right? Where there's plenty of seats at the table. You just have to be willing to work for it. And if you're disciplined enough and willing to put in the effort and the time that it takes, and yeah, and I think, I mean, I've effectively embraced the mantra where I just on a daily basis, I ask for my heart to be in the right place, my intentions to be pure, you know, and my mind to work efficient and effective as much as possible because of how schizophrenic I am naturally, right? It's just how it kind of happens.
That's
but
the uphill battle. Is like it's a gift and a curse when your brain. You're significantly worse off than me. But where I'm sitting, it's just like your brain goes a million miles per hour. You have all these ideas. It's very difficult to try to capture them, not let them fall through the cracks. But I am excited to be, if you look at this situation, this legacy media, imagine they were taking over like a temple and that was their holy place for a long time. And now the temple is empty and it's just like January 6th, right? It's us and a bunch of our retarded homies walking in and going, wow, what's going on in here? And I'm looking forward to establishing ourselves in this new temple and making a fucking mockery of it. But let's get into this conversation, Austin, about Waco. I thought what would be a good thing is let's start from the conventional explanation, a little like 1,000-foot overview. What happened? Because there are people that are unfamiliar with it, and what was the conventional explanation for that event?
All right, and I promise you, I will begin there. But I have one last statement about what you just said, as far as the fact that, like, you know, as we're witnessing the dying off, the last gasp of the mainstream media, and we're seeing kind of the attempted like redirection, right? I think in many ways by the permanent establishment who are attempting to kind of compromise various alternative media assets. And then as well as just effectively, I would think green light operatives within that same context. So you're talking about straight up information agents that I would imagine are being, you know, sent into that very, you know, alternative media landscape in order to re-corral these individuals fleeing from the lying, you know, the last gasp, right? And so the way that I kind of put it in terms of like, I covered Mockingbird, modern Mockingbird kind of. We as far as with William Ramsey, we kind of took it from Operation Mockingbird in its infancy to modern day and its current construct. And just as MKUltra is considered and all of these clandestine covert operations, they only went underground after they were truly exposed to the public, right? There was no real transparency, no accountability effectively took place. And so you had most of these covert operations driven underground through plausible deniability cutouts in order to consistently sophisticate these measures and utilize them in different test groups, right, that are isolated and that in itself played out in many ways in a lot of these various scandals that took place domestically within the US after this false transparency took place. And so, but the point being, as far as the Mockingbird note that I wanted to finish before we move on is just that I think the ultimate goal and the key role of the media itself is to amplify and repeat without skepticism, essentially. So you don't necessarily have to have each and every individual entirely compromised. But then again, it's like you look at Tim Pool with his new White House press credential sitting there. Like in my mind, you couldn't be more compromised after functioning off Chatham House rules and meeting with Netanyahu, and now you have a White House press credential. I mean, like, what are we dealing with here? But still, it's very difficult for, you know, when it boils down to it, we were having that discussion, like, who is a spook? Who is a Fed? And when, you know, it's a difficult thing to honestly.
Can I explain that to Top a little bit? Because he wasn't here for that. Top, what I was saying was, you know, within this community, we do a lot of speculating as to who's a Fed, who's an op. And I think a lot of what lends itself to that speculation is watching somebody reach a level of notoriety where you begin to suspect that they couldn't get there without the help of Feds or without being controlled ops. And now what I'm realizing is people are looking at us that way, but we got to this place without any help. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm saying now that we've gotten here, I can see all the steps that we took to get here. And it's making me do some internal, you know, auditing. Like, who have I called the Fed because I thought that they got to some place they should have never been able to get to? But now in hindsight, that's not the case.
there's a question with like Tim Pool as well. Let's say for a good example, is he a Fed? I don't even know if that's the right word to explain what he is.
Who's
But
that, Tim?
Tim, yeah. But then it's
Yeah.
like on the way as he's like, because I have right now we have our nose, our head down, and we're constantly chipping away at growing this thing. I don't know what's being added to or like what is real, what is not real. So let's say you're Tim and you're doing the same thing and you're growing your thing and then it starts growing. Like I am worried about growing this. I'm not going to look around and be like, hold on a second. Like I think Milo brought it up on his show and I feel like we're getting a little sidetracked, but it is important to this part. Milo was talking about the Russian money. And he was like, listen, I don't even know where that Russian money came from. Like we saw that it came in and we looked for it. And he was like, well, it's a substantial amount of money. How could you not have audited it? And it's like, I kind of get it. He's like, there's $100,000 coming in, but this guy makes $10 million a month. And he's like, that's a lot. Where'd it come from? And then his people around him don't fucking really know anything. So he's like, oh, well, and then you're autistically growing your shit. Well, later on, when you get the tap to come down and meet with Netanyahu, it's like, yo, man, we've already grown your shit. And it's like, yeah, you're going to do this. I feel like him, Rogan, there's a couple of people that are like growing their thing, but it grew unnaturally. They didn't notice. And it's like, how the hell would you notice or stop it? And now you're in a position of it's like, well, now you do what we say. And now he's doing what they say. But at least I will say this about Tim. Thank you for fucking tipping us. Thanks for tipping us off because in the most obvious way, like you did this, announced your meeting with Netanyahu. You've been screaming at people, anyone who like even talks against Israel a little bit, like in the most obvious way. Right. And now you're a White House correspondent. It's like, we know what you are. I don't know if that's what you set out to be, but it's almost like Maj Touré. He's a fucking retard, but he always said, if you ever see me driving like I'm like my security's guy, I got a black Bentley and a white Bentley. That means I sold out. That's your sign. And I'm like, yeah, all right. Like respect. That's your sign. So maybe the sign is like, yeah, I met with Netanyahu under Chatham House rules at the White House. That's your sign.
That's the other thing too. That's how we think that those meetings go down. You know, you imagine you meet in a closed door meeting with fucking Netanyahu and he does it. But like there is degrees to like I saw somebody, I think Stu Peters was getting drilled for this. And it was like, so he goes off about the Jews all day long, right? And then they find out that one of his sponsors is a Jew, like it's a Jewish owned business. It's a gold business.
Which one isn't?
Well, yeah, find me a fucking gold business that's not owned by a Jew. But and he's like, yeah, I guess he is owned by a Jew. And I was like, you know, I'm all for getting these people and cornering them, and it doesn't even make you dislike them. It's just like I like watching people get pressed, but I'm like, yeah. Should I start asking all our sponsors what they believe? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you reach out to us and they go, fucking, hey, we got a company reaching out to us right now, Magic Mind. And I gotta go like, hey, fucking Magic Mind.
Magic Jewish? Mind, what's your mailing address? I'm gonna send you a caliper so you could measure your nose really quickly. And like, I don't know, dude.
If there's an owner that's male, I would appreciate a picture of his penis. I need to know, circumcised or not circumcised. You know what I mean? Like, it's you're in the middle of trying to build something. The Stu Peters Network, fucking whatever this is, you know, and it's impossible to vet. Right now, it's just me and Top. We could not vet everything that's coming in. There's no time. We don't have time. We're like flying by the seat of our pants. So I don't know. I suppose that leaves the door open for then finding out that you've been funded by a Jew this entire time, and then it fucks up your whole narrative, you know.
Your credibility is in question at that point. Look, man, the problem is that once you're always going to have these naysayers that exist. And again, it's due to the fact that I think personally, I had mentioned this as well, like if you aren't pursuing something that you're passionate about, that is truly worthwhile in the grand scheme of just, again, are you actually filling your time, right, with legitimately attempting to practice these core root principles that you've ethically kind of, you know, ironed out for yourself. You understand what is worthwhile, how you should spend your time. And in doing so, you might actually accomplish something, right, by focusing and prioritizing this path. And I think that certain people who basically are, it's the soul trap, right? It's honestly, it's this the God hole, right? The New Age esoteric ideological system of control has essentially and very, very effectively taken hold, and I think disrupted their ability to, one, just appreciate another person's success. Because when you have yet to feel in any real way fulfilled as an individual, then yeah, you lash out inherently. I think it's a subconscious thing. Most people aren't even aware of this, and you become more of, you embrace bad ideas to begin with, but you definitely become more of I would say just very much an envious and negative person as far as your overall outlook and perspective on individual success, that especially if you know them personally, it might affect you even more so. And I think that there is something to say about that. And it's a disgusting natural instinct that happens to people who, again, aren't feeling in any real way fulfilled and pursuing something they're passionate about that makes them feel like it's a worthwhile, just, again, like, what if you're spending all of your time just, wasting away, right? And what do you have to show for it? And so every step of the way, you're going to have this negative outcome in terms of your overall philosophical perspective on things. And so, yeah, I just think that it's almost threatening to a lot of people whenever they view individuals, actually succeeding in certain ways. And then beyond that, you have this, you're talking about the death of the mainstream media. This is the whole point I was trying to make, because there is a reason that public trust is at an all-time low. And even the herd marching in lockstep, as I put it before, it's kind of how I like to really just effectively describe this, because they can sense something is wrong. Even they can sense something is wrong. And so you have many of these people frantically turning to these various false prophets that have been constructed in the alternative media landscape, and they're disinformation operatives oversaturating that very alternative media landscape. And essentially the masses, right? The masses of ignorant individuals who have yet to really kind of isolate their own principles and understand how they should philosophically engage with reality itself. They're falling into these traps. They're being psychologically corralled into the permanent establishment narrative. And this is in a newly adapted form of modern Mockingbird, which has seemingly conformed to meet, right, this new kind of what's basically become this fifth generational information warfare environment. And so that in itself, I think, is worth, acknowledging and mentioning, because this is all based on Tavistock methods and of social engineering and deception and creating culture using Hollywood as a tool. And I think that's another thing, right? I think I told you guys before, like, there was a liaison office set up in '96, right, in for Hollywood, right, to legitimately influence, create scripts, right, have directors come in and provide them with not only, like, did you have the Claire Danes example, right, of how she's explaining they went to spy camp and basically, they went to a meeting in Langley, right, her and the script writers. Do what?
For Homeland?
Yeah, for Homeland. Yeah, her and the script writers and the directors, they all went and had a meeting at Langley in Virginia at the CIA headquarters. And John Brennan was there, man. I mean, the guy that brought slavery back to Libya,
You just saw that shit where Wanda Sykes was like, "Oh yeah, I was part of the NSA or something." I'm like, "What the fuck?"
She said
Wanda
she worked
Sykes,
for
like,
CIA, yeah.
yeah, you have no idea how many. It is a useful tool. A propaganda machine is a useful tool for an intelligence agency that engages in cultural manufacturing. And so why would they not scoop up the apparatus that is involved in that machine? The actors, the actresses, Wanda Sykes, you name it, whoever it is.
Oh, sure.
There are people that you probably wouldn't suspect, but then you would find out, oh shit, like, I never suspected that Wanda Sykes was a fucking, was an actual Fed.
That was such a funny video to watch.
Yeah,
But,
it is. It's a strange video for her because she says it so nonchalantly. She says it as it's just a matter of fact, and it's almost like either she doesn't see the greater implications of it, she doesn't think that it's strange, or she doesn't think that it will stick out as strange to the general public. And if the latter is true, I don't blame her, because we're retarded. But actually, I know we never we never got into it, guys. We're at the 31-minute mark. We got to cut the stream. We're going live exclusively to patreon.com// one of the slashes. Nephilim Death Squad. If you want to continue enjoying this conversation, engaging in the live chat and all that other stuff, you could do so for free, actually, at patreon.com/ Nephilim Death Squad. Sign up for the 7-day free trial and enjoy as much content as you can. And then, run away before the billing cycle kicks in. What do I care? It's fine. Please stay. But otherwise, please stay, guys. Don't do that to us. I know I joke, I kid. But otherwise, we are now going live exclusively to that place that I just talked about. Bye-bye. Austin, for the sake of the audience, let's get into this conversation about Waco, because I do think it's an important thing to talk about. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the conventional explanation, the conventional narrative that we received as the public, and then Austin, the idiosyncrasies, the things that don't add up, the things that you suspect may be true about this event. So go ahead and take it away.
All right. So, I mean, the official story, obviously, you have essentially, it's very interesting as far as how this was all staged, because again, like, we should probably begin at the investigative level, like where it kind of, but as far as the overall presentation of what took place, I mean, it was only 6 months after the Ruby Ridge, right? The siege at Ruby Ridge. And so that matters to me in terms of, let's say 1992, you have the Ruby Ridge incident. And then you have 6 months later, you have Waco. And in 95, right, on the anniversary of both Ruby Ridge and Waco, right, you have the effectively, you have the Oklahoma City bombing take place, right, where Timothy McVeigh specifically himself claims that obviously the Ruby Ridge standoff and the Waco siege, he cited personally as the main reasons for him and Terry Nichols' plan to stage the Oklahoma City bombing, and which was only 2 years after Waco, April 19th, 95. So, and then of course that really, I think, smeared and tarnished the modern day right-wing American militia movement at the time, which I think was by design as well, and also became a huge tool for the Total Information Awareness Project that was being set up by the intelligence apparatus, which really paved the way for a lot of these new dystopian legislative, let's say, the precursor to the Patriot Act was passed just after the Oklahoma City bombing, right? So that was another reason for how they could effectively pass through totalitarian legislative action, and also kind of staged the public perception as far as domestic terrorism is concerned, while consistently utilizing, if you remember, in 95, when the OKC bombing first happened, there were reports that it was actually an Islamist terrorist, right? A Muslim terrorist. And
wait,
so
that was the reports for what?
For the Oklahoma City bombing.
That was the original reports?
Yeah, there were original reports that were coming out that were claiming that, yeah, it was effectively a Muslim terrorist who had staged the Oklahoma City bombing. And then obviously Timothy McVeigh took center stage, but still it's very interesting how they kind of, again, manage public perception in these throughout these incidents, and also provide kind of if you're considering the two-party delusion, and kind of how they really, I believe the pendulum swing is much more of a controlled swing. They know exactly where it will inevitably end up, and unfortunately we remain on this dystopian totalitarian path. And so, like, that's my perspective, is that the one side accomplishes what the other cannot. And so that's where you see, like, conservatives passing more gun control legislation than Obama could ever dream of. It's like, right, President bump stock, you know what I mean? Like post 2017 Vegas shooting, like, what do they utilize? Their precedent setting operations. And so the whole point here, though, is that this is how I, kind of presented this personally, was that, we have to spotlight the federal government's abuse of power, is really what I think is the ultimate point with, as far as just to be had in terms of Waco. And so you have obviously this unwarranted conflict, and in my mind, deliberate mishandling, and as far as undermining hostage negotiators and things of that nature, which we'll get into those details. But so it's this unwarranted conflict unnecessarily escalated by government agents, which would inevitably lead to this tragic loss of life, which included 28 children, right, becoming widely known as the Waco siege. But the way that I put it is that we're all Branch Davidians now, right? Like, honestly, that was the way that I put it in my framework of the story, because that's how I personally felt. Like, as much as we can have the discussion about like the moral framework of what David Koresh was, who he was he a monster? Maybe, it's possible. But do you still go in to rescue the children by burning them alive? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Oh, I
yeah.
mean, yeah. As far as rescue techniques, that's top 3 at least. Set them on fire, burn them alive. That's a
Right.
great way to do it. What is how does Koresh end up with this, passionate following, this cult?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no really other
somewhat
other way to put it.
Also,
It
are
is, yeah.
is there any veracity to this being like a I believe it was like either cloning or some kind of like breeding program cult? Is that
No. Hey,
okay?
I will say former CIA officials have made these claims, and legitimately there's a report that was sent to Janet Reno, the attorney general at the time. And this report claims that David Koresh has ties to the CIA and mind control techniques that were sophisticated and utilized by this local institution, that they were actually So essentially, there was a mind control programming, a sophisticated operation being conducted at this local institution, which had ties to the MKUltra operation, which CIA operatives were affiliated with this institution. And they claimed that the Branch Davidians were being programmed out of this local institution near Palestine, Texas, which is very near Mount Carmel and Waco compound.
Would I mean, that's not all of them, right? I mean, that's got to be the most influential people at the
They
top
said
of this.
Yes, which was another part, was that basically Koresh and his essentially his the surrounding authorities who were basically kind of like his right-hand men who were carrying out much of the conceptual outline of the group. They were basically instilling that within the framework of the Davidians, that effectively they were waking up from their programming. And that I've heard this in terms of even Randy Weaver as well, that apparently, and keep this in mind, Tim McVeigh, Green Beret, these are all former Green Berets, and you're thinking, is there apparently with special forces, there's a potentially operationally, they legitimately put these Green Berets through mind control techniques, right?
Mhm.
Through sophisticated MKUltra techniques, and that basically that they trigger many of them to become sleeper assassins, essentially, that they can have programmed to target and green light at any moment to create some sort of scandalous, like, domestic strategy of tension, let's say Operation Gladio. Now, this makes sense in terms of the psychopath machine, how they were kind of like there was a systematic strategic approach of isolating these specific characteristics and profiles that individuals would fit, and essentially it would prove that they had psychopathic tendencies, obviously, and they would be recruited. But basically, according to their lifestyle, most of them were already committing heinous crimes, and so they would.
I'm wondering if what they're looking for, Austin, is childhood trauma that lends itself to a dissociative identity disorder. Like, if you're on the cusp of it, if you already have that proclivity, if they could identify those psychological traits as you are an individual that has, you're on the edge of this dissociative identity disorder, you're a prime candidate for this sort of a thing.
100%. And here, check this out, because Hillary Clinton for sure had more of a apparently she legitimately herself could have helped pursue and push forward the climactic siege tactics that played out in a very negative way, which I found very interesting. That apparently there's many reports claiming that Hillary ordered the final massacre at Waco, and that it was all based on the fact that the new Clinton, the Clinton administration, essentially it was all for, PR, right, for optics in many ways, that they just needed an end to this, right, and so it was a 51-day siege by the end of it, obviously. But what I found interesting is that I discovered recently that 3 of Bill Clinton's bodyguards during the 92 election, right, during his campaign, they were engaged in the Waco operation as officers of the ATF. And this is very crazy because out of the 4, because only 4 ATF officers were actually killed in the initial raid, because there was on the initial raid, the day of the raid, it resulted in a 2-hour standoff. And yeah, 4 ATF agents had essentially been shot, right? And so out of the 4 officers who were shot and killed in the initial raid, 3 of them happened to be the same former Clinton bodyguards from Clinton's campaign in 92.
Oh, does that add to the body count?
It adds to the body count in my mind. You know, it's very strange that 3 of the 4 were Clinton bodyguards in the 92 election campaign. And so, you know,
Were they demoted? Well, like, is that a demotion from like?
I don't know. Honestly, as far as I'm not entirely certain how that would have happened in my mind. If you're a bodyguard, you're not necessarily, are they Secret Service? Like, who knows? I'm trying to, you know, I didn't assess if they were Secret Service, because I know Secret Service are effectively involved in more covert operations than you'd be aware of. Like the Secret Service were involved at, let's say, the Confessions of a DC Madam with the Henry Vinson prostitution operation happening in DC that was basically these gay call boys and stuff like that were being utilized. That were also, they had free range at the White House during the Bush administration, Bush Sr., which is very fascinating. But that's where they had the midnight tours of the White House that Paul Bonacci, the Franklin scandal victim, who has been an amazing resource as far as essentially exposing a lot of these state-sponsored child trafficking operations. And
that's where the rumors come from that the Bushes were into boys, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason being is because you had members of George Bush Sr.'s Secret Service who were running security for that brothel, which was entirely rigged with audiovisual blackmail. And you know who was sitting at Henry Vincent's place whenever or it was Henry Vincent and Craig Spence, right? So Craig Spence was a huge piece of shit and essentially tied in with the intelligence community and was running a lot of this for human compromise and sexual blackmail. But who was posted up at this property that was filled with audiovisual blackmail in a covert way, very much like, let's say, the Epstein properties, right?
I mean, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Two-way mirrors, you know, closets with tripods, and who does he come in? Henry Vincent comes into Craig Spence's operation, and he sees none other than Larry King sitting on the couch from the Franklin scandal, from the Franklin Credit Union, who was, you know, caught in the embezzlement scandal and exposed the entire network, ties with military intelligence. He himself was apparently Paul Bonacci witnessed him passing off money at Offwood Air Force Base in Nebraska, right? And which is where they say was the hub of Project Monarch, which is trauma-based mind control. That's what that is, right? And so, and I believe that most of it is through sexual trauma, which is, you know,
Project Monarch was a little bit different. So there's MKUltra and Monarch. Monarch was about creating effectively like influencers.
Monarch felt to me like it was the ultimate way to implement the alters, right? The hundreds of alters of personalities for the multiple personality disorder DID victims, and it seems to have. I mean, you know, it's again there are these techniques have been very well sophisticated over time, and it's like it's very hard to even comprehend, honestly, until you've read through them, because it feels like, again, you almost have to reflect on what you believe is even possible in the reality that you subscribe. I mean, that's what happens, you know, at the end of the day, and it's fascinating stuff. But the whole point of at least a brief note on what you had mentioned about the mind control aspect of Waco. This is Paul Wiltshire. It was the Wiltshire report that this is fascinating shit, man. I just recently discovered it. And I would have approached Waco in an entirely different way if I knew that this was, you know, as far as just like potential allegations of credibility. Because to me, just knowing that Attorney General Janet Reno, like there were absolutely no claims of mass suicide by the Davidians. They themselves said, no, we're not going to kill ourselves. And then, you know, what does Janet Reno claim? She says that they're probably going to commit mass suicide like the people at Jonestown, right? And like legitimately puts them in parallel directly. And that, in my mind, is no accident.
No, that's a
when you
perfect
understand-
opportunity to engineer public opinion about this event. It's like,
Exactly.
Jonestown. Everybody knows Jonestown. That's a emotionally charged topic, and it's sensationalized, and liken it to that.
I'm still so stuck on the fact that 3 of Clinton's former bodyguards were ATF agents, and they were the 3 of the 4 that rushed the windows. When you see that video, you're like, what a fucking bunch of dummies. Like, these guys, this was an arsenal, and you're trying to like come in through a window where they see you coming. It's like, that was a death sentence that they sent these guys on. So it's like the order, it's so crazy. It creates, it makes me mad at like Scott Horton, because it creates this whole idea of what this thing was. Obviously, they didn't do this just to kill these 3 bodyguards. That's like one of these, you know, while we're here kind of things. But it does throw the intention of whatever happened there like completely upside down. Like, you have to really rethink about what this whole thing was.
It seems like some of those events, they use them for like, you know, if Hillary Clinton's trying to get rid of her bodyguards, it doesn't matter if it was that event or another event. Like, if she's there and people are going to die, she's like, well, if people are going to die, I know of a few people that could be tossed in there.
Absolutely, man. And especially considering that they had just gotten elected, just came into office. Waco was a thorn in their side for political PR, you know, just as far as optics wise. Like, look, man, we need to put an end to this, because everyone is starting to become a little bit, you know, as far as we're having visceral overreactions on both sides of the political aisle in terms of this scandal playing out. And we need to at least put a lid on it and effectively control the outcome of the perception. And I think that was another aspect of a lot of this, which is why they could never admit that they fired first. They could never admit, you know, oh, I'm sorry, the front door of the Waco compound just happened to go missing out of our evidence locker. Whoops, that would have unequivocally proven who fired first. But, you know, sorry, that was an accident. We, you know what I mean? It's like that alone, beyond the fact that you have, man, it was crazy to me, because you actually have FBI, right, claiming that ex-CIA officer had Delta Force participating in the final assault, right? And so you had, you know, this became like an intelligence sharing operation on the ground level operationally, where they were figuring out, how can we utilize siege tactics on a domestic citizenry in a controlled test subject context with American civilians. You know, honestly, like that's really what took place. You want to see what happens when we take American civilians out to a clandestine CIA black site where we trained up Angolan rebels in the jungles of Guyana, and stage Jonestown, where we're actually fundamentally sophisticating these methods of psychological warfare on the Jonestown victims, and then have Green Berets called in to shoot on sight right before they even landed all of the remaining surviving victims. Like, it just feels like all of this is very much happening around the same window of opportunity, where this very similar playbook is being just, you know, honestly, just recycled tactics, but resurfacing, you know, a technical standpoint as far as the operational standpoint of it. It's almost like you could put Jonestown and Waco right next to each other.
That's what they wanted, it seems like, at least to the public's perception. What were the Davidians like? What was the galvanizing material? What did they believe?
Before you go into that, you had said just before that we are all the Branch Davidians now. And this is like an idea that we've been touching on as well. We're going to be on Tinfoil Hat in 2 weeks or so. We're going to talk about Andrija Puharich and his work with Operation Stargate and Channeling the Nine. And what we think is the continuation of, the origination of MKUltra, but we think that this is what we're living through is just a continuation of it, a continuation of MKUltra. Whereas, like you're saying, we're all the Branch Davidians. I'm like, we're all the children strapped in a chair being tortured, but it's done via, you know, inoculation schedule for us. It's like these events that happened in the past. It's like they do these like very small trial runs. They'll do them in private. Then it'll have to be disclosed years later. They probably weren't counting on FOIA or things like that, or just people losing paperwork or misplacing it. I believe somebody like left MKUltra on a desk, and that's how somebody found out about it. They're like, what the fuck is that? Yeah, and they start reading, asking questions. So that's the trial. Then they do a practice run, and you'll have a Waco, you'll have a Jonestown where they're like, let's see if we can do this on, like to a couple hundred people. We did it. And now it feels like we're at the stage where they're like, do it nationwide. Or maybe even worldwide at this point. And
that
we're
seems
there.
to be what they do. It's like they have a thing, they do it in a microcosm in a controlled environment, right? A sterile environment where they're practicing, and then eventually they'll change the name and it'll go under a different name, but the research will continue. They'll say the old one's dead, and then once they get to a certain point where it's promising enough, then it's time to roll it out to the masses, and then you become free range MKUltra victims, or you become free range Davidians, like shit like that.
I called it, at one point I described it as a nation under mind control, but it's like, no, you guys are entirely correct on that as far as the international scope of this. Like it's transcends borders, man. This has become, really, that is why I love the idea and the concept of InfoWars, right? Because that truly is like we reside in this modern form. This is modern warfare, right? The control over the human mind, and it's the controlling our ideas, or our ideas inevitably control the outcome. And so that in itself, you know what I mean? It's something that, man, once you begin to realize the level of, the measures that they have legitimately put into place and how they've actually succeeded in these ways of, like, for example, Dr. Robert Duncan, I've used as an example multiple times because he wrote this book. He's a Harvard-trained professor, wrote a book called Cyber and Cybernetics Revealed. And it is fascinating shit because essentially he's discussing how modern mind control truly works, and how, no, they don't necessarily rely upon microchips, actually, because they're far more unreliable. They truly prefer to rely upon post-hypnotic suggestion and EMF.
I think there's an addition to that, though, Austin, and I think it's one that has only been recognized kind of recently. They used to do it with implants. And, metal is a great conductor. It conducts frequencies.
This is all Indrija Puharich stuff, right?
This is all Indrija Puharich shit.
Even the EMF stuff, like, I'll tell you about in a second. Go ahead, tell them.
But what I'm getting at is that they never stopped even that program. The same way they never stopped the programs, they just roll them out to the masses. They never stopped putting metal in you. They just started doing it in a slow drip in the inoculation. So the vaccine schedule is filled with heavy metals, and they've been giving them in small doses throughout your entire life instead of some sort of invasive surgery. You just get everybody on the same schedule. If you want to go to public school, you have to get this. And it's a quick little thing. Just show up like 6, 7, 8, 9, 37 times, throughout your life. And eventually you'll have enough metal in you that you'll be great at receiving whatever frequencies they want to bombard you with.
And the EMF stuff, it's one of the things that Puharich discovered was called ELF waves, ELF. So that's like extremely low frequency waves. They're like at the Schumann resonance, some of these frequencies. And they determined that, well, we could manipulate people's emotions and even have some sort of mind control ability, but they scaled it back. Check out why they scaled it back. It's fucking crazy. They're like, it's actually changing the weather. Like,
holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I know. So this motherfucker is doing like dental implant surgeries. Like could have even had like an effect on people like L. Ron Hubbard, who started Scientology after having a near-death experience, after having a dental implant. But it's just crazy stuff. This guy's everywhere. Brother. Then you have ELF waves manipulating people's emotions.
I know what's happening here.
Like,
we're dancing all over Austin's research, and he's like, "How?" Because we have weird pieces that fit into this really well.
But the ELF wave stuff is crazy because then that obviously is the birth of the HARP machine, because that comes out a little bit later. And
no, Top, they never did that. They looked at that and they said, "This can alter the weather. We'd better leave this the fuck alone. We better back off and stop doing this."
Florida's voting on legislation to stop like geoengineering. So I'm like, oh, so you guys are doing this. It's like, if you're going to ban it, then by admission, you're doing it, right? And everyone's just like,
can't ban a thing you're not fucking doing.
It's wild,
I mean,
man.
well, the Project Popeye, they were utilizing weather warfare in Vietnam.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
we know for a fact that they have this ability, but yeah, the HARP facility, that's fascinating stuff. I covered that whenever I covered the DARPA's LifeLog project, because I had to, in passing, discuss the High MIMS program, where they're like essentially creating cybernetic organisms out of hummingbird flight muscles and shit. It was what, yeah. So James Holmes from the Aurora, Colorado cinema, right? The Dark Knight theater shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was involved in DARPA's HIMEMS program, and his father and grandfather were affiliated with intelligence at the psychological warfare level. And so just understanding that, and by the way, his father and Adam Lance's father were both caught up in the LIBOR scandal, which is all about rigging international interest rates, man, and controlling the outcome of financial markets. So,
This is what we keep finding, Austin. You go back to, let's say, like 1940, and from that point forward, all the people that everybody mentions whenever you talk about these things, we've started to realize like every single one of them are intimately connected to the other guy. And as much as I hate these motherfuckers for what they've done, I realize like, damn, this thing just snowballed out of control. Like they discovered something with frequency at once upon a time, and its application to the human condition in conjunction with trauma. And that thing right there became the foundation to fucking everything that plagues us today. Everything that plagues us today started in like 1940, and all these guys, you know, Puharich and L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons, all the way, they're all just fucking high-fiving and hanging out with each other, you know, big gay orgies and all this shit. And all the work they laid back then is the foundation for what plagues us today.
Yeah, and I just recently discovered that. Well, I knew that L. Ron Hubbard was an intelligence operative, but you know, I'm definitely under the impression now that Scientology itself was an intelligence operation, and that, you know, there's a reason that they're directly connected with the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which has it's overexposed in every single aspect of honestly each and every one of these scandals, targeted assassinations. I mean, they were a part of the killing of the King ritual in Dallas in '63, man. You know, what was Kerry Thornley, who's one of Oswald's impersonators, who created the Discordianism, New Age theology, which is a New Age esoteric occult religion, which is legitimately what seems like Michael Aquino, the Temple of Set, right?
Yeah.
Claims he had a fallout with Anton LaVey, which in reality is just a huge, in my mind, misdirection, as far as they truly just wanted to consistently utilize a lot of these occult organizations for plausible deniability cutouts to run monarch, human trafficking, right, drug trafficking, weapons, arms smuggling. Like, that's what I realize now, is that.
But then there is this element. So they're engaging all these things that are you know, you can find paper trails, you could follow the money, you could understand why this. But then if you look into Aquino, it's like he's not faking the funk for his love of Satanism. He's not faking the funk for this esoteric occult shit that he's leaning on. And none of these guys are. So you know, you have this thing where you keep running into it. I know your research. I know Jose, he's coming on soon to talk about Aquino. And it's like you try to deal in the tangibles for the audience's sake, particularly names, places, accounts, corporations, dates, all this stuff. But what happens is you keep slamming up against the intangible, which is this weird ass occult spiritual thing that some people have thrown away. They've dismissed it as like, yeah, a lot of that is smoke and mirrors, so that you can also engage in this sort of satanic panic dismissal that works really well, right? You can add a supernatural element, thereby when people identify it, you can call them crazy. It works very, very well.
There's a point to that, but yeah, I see.
But then
what
it goes
you're saying.
beyond that, and it's like, no, these dudes are, you know, creating ass homunculi. Like they're really doing things.
Not just that. I mean, like what Austin is talking about here is that there is a specific calculation to hack the human mind. And it seems like these people have this shit dialed down. They have it dialed down to a perfect science. They can do it. And what we're looking at now is the expansion of it across the entire nation, across the entire world. So that is like, but then you get into the question of like, well, what is magic and what is science and what is the occult? Occult just means like hidden knowledge. It's like, this is knowledge that they know now that they probably shouldn't know, but they do. So it looks like magic.
Yeah, and they inherently become the vanguards and the protectors of that hidden knowledge, which is why they're all, uh, at the very least, holding like dual loyalty to these various organizations of fraternal, powerful influence, like secret
Mhm.
societies and various like the Pilgrim Society and things of that nature. But you know, yeah, I think that once you realize, like, yeah, there's no denying the fact that Michael Aquino practiced and believed what, right? You know what I mean? It's like just
Yeah.
look up the pictures of
You don't
he and
I'm
Lilith.
sorry. You don't not believe in demons and have
Mm.
eyebrows like that.
Can't
Like,
do
I
No.
think
one
the
or the other.
eyebrows are a result of the interactions
Mhm.
with the demons. There's no
Oh yeah.
fucking way that guy didn't believe what he was getting into.
Exactly, and you put him side by side to with David Ferry, and they have very similar eyebrows. I think I'm
Hell
telling you
yeah,
right now,
dude.
it's crazy. But
That's physiognomy. I'm sorry. If you walk up and
Mhm.
I don't care what kind of suit you're in. I don't care what venue we're at, what kind of a setting. If you walk up to me, you have eyebrows like that, dark arts occultist. I know what you're
Right.
doing because you only get eyebrows like that one way. So yeah, 100%. You're showing up to those parties that the Podestas are hanging out. You're collecting the same
Right.
artwork
Pretty
as
sure
them.
it's in the Bible. It says, "Thou shalt not have eyebrows like that."
That's why I trim
No,
my fucking eyebrows. You can see the audience knows my eyebrows want to start doing that shit. I have to keep them. I have to trim them so that I can stay
I love it.
within reasonable bounds.
Right. No, but what's so crazy is that when Aquino was tied to there's Aquino.
Fuck yeah, dude. Honestly, big fan of the eyebrows though. I really am.
When he was tied to the Presidio scandal up in San Francisco at the military base there, where they were finding all these obvious satanic ritualistic sites, right, where they were holding these occult rituals, and nearby there was an investigation done where this child, who was the child of one of the military families at the Presidio that were housed there, she was like sadistically abused among many others who described very similar forms of abuse while they were being watched and taken care of on the grounds of the Presidio itself and the child care organization there. And it was because it was directly tied to military intelligence and the Monarch Project being facilitated at the time. So they're abducting children or just utilizing them in these rituals and abusing them during the course of the day. And you have the children coming home. They're like 3 years old. They're unable to even verbalize the form of abuse they're experiencing. One of them called it, like, just like with the McMartin preschool incidents, like pee pee poo poo baseball and shit, like talking about how they essentially like mention the caretaker by name, effectively utilizing a pencil in their butts and shit, like terrible shit, dude. And but he was entirely affiliated with that sadistic form of abuse happening there, while the West Point scandal popped off as well, which was eerily similar. And so you have one of the abused children actually acknowledging who she was victimized and abused by, and it was Michael Aquino, and it was his wife Lilith, right? And
What's
apparently,
her name?
Her name is
Lilith,
Lilith. His
man.
wife's name is Lilith.
Interesting.
Yes,
Continue.
yes. You look up those two. There's a picture of them with a upside down pentagram, and they're sitting with their cloak, their religious ritualistic cloaks on, and they would inherently, apparently, during the course of their abuse with the children, they would reverse gender roles while they were
Ah,
abusing the children, which has to playing. Yeah, there's another one where she's like standing next to him and she's sitting in like a throne style chair. But yeah, they're clearly practicing occultists that
yeah.
in more ways than one were sociopathic abusers that were targeting and specifically targeting children that were
Children.
under a certain age.
That thing too of like the gender inversion shit. I mean, when people think that I'm being hyperbolic when I say, like, all of this gender inversion crap, all of this trans crap, this all stems from like ancient Babylonian bullshit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And if you look to these cults that are still practicing it, you see like, oh yeah, that's where it has its roots. Its
Right.
roots are in whenever you get to this point where you're like engaging in speaking to negative spirits, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
now you're an occultist. It's like that's always an element. There's sex magic, dark sex magic. There's always child abuse, and there's always some element of gender inversion, role playing, or
Yeah.
actual, trying to move children in that direction.
Oh yeah. And in the Concora scandal in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, I found out that essentially they target for the occult ritualistic practices. A lot of the local chapters of these occult organizations will target prepubescent children for the blood ritual. And that in itself, Raven is gender inverted.
That's right. That's right.
There's proof. There's actually proof of it.
There
It's
is
crazy.
proof. We got to put that on a t-shirt. Can we put that on a t-shirt top? My
It will
gender
be on a
inverted
t-shirt.
pictures.
Yeah, 100%.
That's awesome. I would love to do that. That's a banger of a shirt. So in the conspiracy community, you have this concept of like EGI, which is elite gender inversion, which there's probably some real argument for that shit, given Macron and things like that. But I think they take it a step too far. But one of the things that they use is this triangle, and they'll try to put the triangle over your face, and it'll determine like the spacing between your eyes and how it's relative to the spacing to your mouth determines whether or not you are a male or a female. And I did it to myself, and I was like, this shit says I'm a female every time, which could be possible. I was raised by women. I was probably almost gay. So at the very least, my skull structure might have been altered due to the absence of my father. But this is something that they get incredibly carried. There we go. Yeah, it fits perfectly over me. I'd love to turn that into a shirt.
That's so funny.
But I don't even really fault people for thinking that shit is more rampant than it actually is, because there seems to be, Michelle Obama's a man. That's a whole ass nigga. So I really don't blame people at all.
Mm-hmm. I saw Fire Pixie and Dr. Corbeau in the chat mention Ted Gunderson being good friends with Michael Aquino. And one of the McMartin moms that Ted Gunderson had lived with for a time and I think had a sexual relationship with while he was investigating McMartin, which, draws in obviously subpar ethical practices and standards, you would think. But so that alone, it's like, and then you consider that Ted Gunderson ran the LA office of the FBI for quite some time. So he's always considered to be like a glowing source that you can't quite all the way,
Slippery.
Yeah, it's difficult to gauge the credibility there, but I've also I've discovered so many lines of evidence that he's provided me in many of these cases as well that I view to be extremely valuable. So it's a hard thing to navigate, right?
Well,
and
there are people that do that, right? Like I'm never gonna throw Alex Jones bathwater out for fear of tossing out tiny baby Alex Jones, because there is a lot of shit that he says that's like right on the money, but I highly suspect he's a Fed. We're talking about Fed suspecting and. I just don't imagine a guy has a platform that big who hasn't been approached by somebody who realizes that this would be a great, cognitive infiltration, Cass Sunstein fucking kind of an angle to do. That being said, big fan of Alex Jones. I like him a lot. I think that helps people in this. And if you just take it through that lens, it's like you don't have to hate these people and you don't have to follow them like they're Jesus. You could just look over to them and enjoy their information every once in a while, and then engage in some fun speculation as to whether or not they're co-opted.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, 100%. And but yeah, that's Dr. Corbeau. All right, man. I'm sorry that I'm actually questioning if Ted Gunderson is entirely worth condemning. But yeah,
well, it's interesting, Austin, that you even speculated that about Koresh, which is not something that I it's not a outlandish thing to speculate on, but it's not something that is popularly espoused whenever somebody starts talking about Waco and the Davidians.
Oh man,
the squeaky, it's not a squeaky clean narrative, but the narrative of a people's persecuted unjustly by various governing bodies, the ATF and shit, is a better story. After you start to speculate that Koresh may have been an operative himself, that makes it very muddy and very, very confusing.
Absolutely. And it's so much and here's the problem is that I don't want the ultimate conclusion. It truly shouldn't change all that much, except for the fact that there's an additional wrinkle and something that really it would only open up a true in my mind, a far more plausible potential outcome, because it would make a lot of sense of things that didn't quite, like, for example, there was a covert operation by the, investigating authorities at the time, right? Who had set up a house right next to the Waco compound, and had infiltrated the Branch Davidian complex, and were actually like going to Bible study with them.
They're like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah, it was crazy because, again, it's just like he had given them, like, even 2 federal agents went with him to go off property and just fire weapons together, right? And they handed David Koresh the gun, bro, like, to shoot, which is just like, how much is this guy truly a threat if you're willing to do that? And he personally knew that they were federal agents, and even confronted them at a certain time. And so that alone is just like, my God, like, what is truly playing out here? And beyond the fact that it was almost like theatrical in the description of what was happening when Koresh found out, when being tipped off that the raid was imminent. And one of the federal operatives who was undercover, who had infiltrated the Davidian complex, was there during Koresh's Bible study when he was told about the imminent raid. And he comes back down and he looks at him specifically, and he has a conversation about, why is this happening, Robert? Like, legitimately. Wow. And then, it's one of the craziest conversations of all time. And
doesn't that kind of really, I think that is a feather in the hat of men. In that it speaks volumes to how we, like, I could suspect you of being a Fed. You could suspect me of being a Fed. We might even like know this to some degree, but like, you want to go out into this field and shoot guns? Fuck yeah, dude. Fuck yeah, I do. Absolutely. Like, damn it, that's a good time. Yeah.
It's so crazy to me. But then I had mentioned the Wiltshire letter, and I just wanted to, at least, like, for the sake of making that point, and then get into a little bit more details until you want to stop me, honestly, on at least trying to provide some sort of comprehensive outline for Waco. But still, like, the Paul Wiltshire letter to Attorney General Janet Reno, it became the Wiltshire Report, and it was provided in 3 separate, basically 3 separate reports. And so the claim was that David Koresh had an extensive CIA background and was a sleeper who had been subjected to extensive CIA mind control training and programming. Alleges that Waco is a major center for such CIA mind control experimentation, with much of this activity occurring at the CIA's Leadership Management Institute, the LMI, in Waco. And also names Salt Lake City, Utah, Provo, Utah, Logan, Utah, and Boise, Idaho, and San Francisco as the key locations for this, specifically the Leadership Management Institute, and the specific experimentation programming of MKUltra being utilized by the agency. And these are interesting because the Utah and Idaho locations are specifically in reference to the Ted Bundy cases, which I found worthwhile as well. But yeah, so it's, again, it provides the kind of the alternative thread of this CIA sponsored cults being implicated, with the Delta Force being there on the final day, right? And was later on confirmed years after the fact, as far as operatives were sent to kill Koresh. And this is what the report claims in the Wiltshire Report, and the 6 other sleepers within the Davidians before setting the fires that burned down Mount Carmel. So it was like, just like with Jonestown, this is at least the allegation being made. Just like with Jonestown, it was essentially like a cover-up operation. We've been overexposed. Now, obviously, we need to burn it to the ground. And essentially, a lot of the different MKUltra victims who had been utilized in a lot of these experiments, let's say from even the Montreal experiments up in Canada, who were kind of loose ends that needed to be effectively tied off. There were reports that they were sent down to the jungles of Guyana during the Jonestown massacre, when the bodies continued to accumulate. And they claimed that the Guyanese medical authorities and medical examiner, Dr. Leslie Mutu, he didn't know how to count. And that the Guyanese officially they didn't know how to count. Obviously, they're just fucking stupid. And so, you know what I mean? And in reality, they're just adding bodies, because it's truly, in my mind, the opportunity was there. and what happens when you have to kind of, when a covert operation goes up in smoke. Well, then let's say you lure down one of the top CIA watchdogs in the form of Congressman Leo Ryan, who had been proactively investigating MKUltra facilities that were being utilized by the agency, including Vacaville, which was the institution that housed Charles Manson in the early 50s, and then happened to house Donald Cinque DeFries, right, who became the individual part of the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army, who kidnapped Patty Hearst, and it was all connected to MKUltra. He also went to that same facility, and so it's like, yeah, it's completely ridiculous, but it makes so much more sense when you kind of put them, you kind of like, again, I just think you run both of these narratives in parallel, and it kind of plays out, especially reinforcing the misconception in the public framework. You kind of reinforce it with Waco in terms of Jonestown, right? While also conflating David Koresh, to a cult of personality similar to that of a Jim Jones, right? It's very easy for the public to then dismiss at face value any legitimate reason why you would defend such an unorthodox organization or way of life. And then beyond that, you have the Sinful Messiah, which was that article that was written that essentially called him a sadistic abuser of children, who's living a life of he basically took right all of these various children, wives, and apparently some of them were even 12 and 13 according to the Sinful Messiah. But
well, that was what they started saying, was that Koresh, he basically started banging wives and taking like a harem of women, and I mean, that sort of thing, I recognize the human nature in that. I recognize, there's a pattern to recognize there. And that is, when people do this sort of thing, that's always the joke, is how long until they start banging wives? No veracity to that?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm saying, do you think that this is true? Did he engage in those things? Was that
oh yeah,
proven?
no, he without a doubt, there was immoral sexual dynamic that was playing out with the group. And that in itself really made me, it was very difficult to contend with if you're considering the official narrative of not the official narrative, because the FBI and the ATF still claim they didn't shoot first, right? So obviously, in my mind, the official narrative has become just the government proving what they're capable of, obviously. And I've said many times before, it's the best example for that they will not hesitate to drive a tank through your front room and massacre your dogs and essentially target your wife with your newborn baby in her arms. And so again, that's the ultimate conclusion in my mind, is that it does provide us with the perfect example of what the state is truly capable of. But at the same time, you really have to consider how difficult it is to contend with the immoral aspect of David Koresh himself, right? Personally. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's like he was considered to be the lamb, right? So he's already the spiritual leader who's kind of taking over this very much, like, if you consider what his name was to begin with as well, which is very important to understand, is kind of the David Koresh and what it stood for, right? It's very strange in itself, because David, it all like goes back to the biblical King Cyrus, which I also found very interesting. You know what I mean?
Back to King Cyrus. I'm looking for my Trump coin right now, where he's hanging out with King Cyrus. I don't know where it is. How does it go back to King Cyrus?
So essentially, when you're dealing with Koresh himself, he actually, his name was Vernon Howell, right? Vernon Wayne Howell was his original name.
That was David Koresh's name. Why did he change his whole ass name?
Yeah, because he was basically groomed at a certain point. He was basically groomed at a certain point by this woman named Lois Roden, right? And it's very interesting, as far as George Roden was the son of Lois Roden. And you have to understand kind of the background as well. But first, as far as the biblical King Cyrus, this is crazy, because Vernon Wayne Howell was chosen to be the successor of the group because they had made this false prophecy that didn't actually come to fruition. And Lois Yeah. It's an interesting point there as well because, but the last name Koresh was apparently Vernon chose Koresh because it is the biblical name of Cyrus the Great. All right, that is apparently the context here, and so you have David, including himself in the lineage, linking him directly to the biblical King David, obviously but this is where you have the last name apparently evoking Cyrus the Great. And so Vernon was reminded of Cyrus, king of Persia, mentioned prominently in Isaiah 45, according to him, and Babylon conquered Israel in 586 BC and took many Jews into captivity. So this is where you have this weird kind of, let's say, what was it? All the Zog types at the time, like the Randy Weaver types, the Zionist occupied government, right? Which, they didn't believe it in the terms of, right, the Israeli state is corrupting and compromising the current state of the US, right? The US like actual government. It was truly like in terms of the modern state of Israel and the current Jews aren't the real Jews.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, that was
Fascinating.
actually the belief behind it. And so they believe themselves to be the actual Jews.
The Davidians believe themselves to be the
So did Randy Weaver. Yeah.
I want to shout out Dr. Feelgood Fun. I can't pronounce that other word. But he says, what is that?
Dr. Corbeau's Feel Good Fun.
Is that how you would say Corbeau?
That's I think.
Man, we just trimmed off a bunch of letters at the end of my last name. But he says there are Branch Davidians to this day that believe David will return. So they've deified this cat. He is the Messiah to them, I guess. I didn't realize there were still modern day Branch Davidians. You would think if the ATF burnt your children alive, you'd be like, we got to call us something else now.
But I also heard like some of the surviving members, like David Thibodeau, claimed that they never even referred to themselves as the Branch Davidians. And the first time he ever even heard that term was in the media, whenever they were being covered in real time during the scandal, during the height of the siege. And so I found that very strange, although, so it's like it's an offshoot, right, of the like the whole history of the Branch Davidians, I think, is very important, right? Because again, it's like if you understand like what was playing out here, there was like this hilarious challenge as well for this resurrection contest to prove who the real lamb was. And and so like the son of the woman who groomed him, so he's like 28 years old having sex with like a 70-year-old woman. And it's a crazy story because the Branch Davidians, they technically originated in 55 from the schism in the Shepherd's Rod, or the Rod, and also known as the Davidians. And so I think it just kind of became a way to describe.
I thought they were the Davidians because David Koresh.
No. And essentially there was an internal power dispute after the essentially the widow died of the original owner of, or the Victor Hotef was the president and prophet that created the Branch Davidians, right? Technically, which were an offshoot of the Worldwide Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so the Shepherd's Rod, or the Davidians, founded in 1929 by Victor Hotef. So he was the president and prophet who was apparently excommunicated from the Seventh-day Adventists for promoting heretical doctrines, which makes a lot of sense, right? But the Christian Research Institute, they published something that said that the group was headquartered at a property, near Palestine, Texas, which I think that alone is by design, and there's a reason why you would settle in this location. And especially, Mount Carmel. I think every single aspect of this is not at all, it's very thought through symbolically in my mind. And so you have at the core of this ideology, the foundation of the Davidians' belief was this imminent prophecy of apocalypse, right? So it's a doomsday cult, essentially, is what it's being labeled as, and involving the second coming of Jesus and the defeat of the evil armies of Babylon. But the center had been named Mount Carmel after a mountain in Israel, mentioned in Joshua 19:26 in the Old Testament. And so by 59, Victor's widow Florence Hotef announced that the expected Armageddon was about to take place. But after the failure of this prophecy, control of Mount Carmel would fall to Benjamin Roden, the founder of the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Association, known as Branch Davidians. Allegedly, that's where it comes from. So he's the one who begins to promote this different doctrinal belief system that that kind of at least it's essentially a pivot from the original Davidian organization and what they had upheld as their core doctrine. And so this all begins to happen as far as like it becomes far more interesting as far as upon his death, because Lois Roden, his widow, took control of the center, and that's when you begin to have this interesting dynamic play out, because the Branch Davidians, apparently under Benjamin Roden, right? It basically, again, consider the fact that once she's widowed, she decides that George Roden, her son, is unfit to assume the position of the prophet, and instead she grooms this individual named Vernon Wayne Howell, who assumes the name of David Koresh, right? Who becomes the successor. And so in 84, you have this dispute take place, right? Where there's this division in the group, and you have Howell leading one faction, who are referring to themselves allegedly as Branch Davidians, although Thibodeau claims he never really heard that self-descriptive term, but and George Roden leading the competing factions. So after this split takes place, George Roden and apparently by gunpoint runs David Koresh and the rest of the Davidians off the property, and they relocate to Palestine, Texas. And
is it Palestine or is it East Palestine?
I don't know.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say East Palestine before, and I was like, that's weird because of that East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. Like, I'm wondering if there's a pattern there, but I think that's just me schizo reaching.
Getting texted by Jake Shields right now, guys. So
he's like, stop talking about the Jews. Shut it down. Like, no, Jake, we're talking about the Jews today. Unbelievable.
Right. But this is a crazy ass story, man, because this guy, George Roden, right? He had dug up. This is he's attempting to gain control of Mount Carmel, right? And so it's in in November of 86, when there's after her death, whenever there's this real dispute over the property itself. And so George Roden digs up this casket of this woman who was a former Davidian named Anna Hughes from the Davidian cemetery, and had challenged Vernon Howell, David Koresh, to a resurrection contest to prove who was the rightful heir to the leadership.
That's such a cool contest.
Isn't it really?
Such a cool contest.
I can't hear you, Top. What'd you say?
I said, yeah, at Bohemian Grove, we're going to have a resurrection contest. So
we're going to kill Toad. We're going to kill Toad, and we're going to sit there and wait. And nobody leaves until Toad is resurrected.
Oh, my God. But this is just like, imagine how the way that this plays out as well. Like, it kind of points to Koresh and his ability to, he's clearly thinking in a strategic way that most people wouldn't, in my mind, as far as like how you would undermine the ability to take control of this property. And I think that the way that this played out is kind of like impressive as far as, the strategic outcome. And so this guy digs up the body of Anna Hughes, and Howell, instead of accepting the challenge, obviously, he instead goes to the police authorities, the local authorities, and claims that Roden was guilty of corpse abuse.
Hell yeah, and he was, dude. That's such a banger, bro. He's like, yo, resurrection contest. He's like, you're going to prison, bitch. Exactly. Exhumed a corpse, you asshole.
100%. And then he has considered that, members of the inner circle of Koresh are like high-level attorneys who had, graduated from Harvard, and yeah. So again, he provides this tip, but the authorities say that we need evidence. We can't actually pursue this without any sort of incriminating evidence, because we don't have any ability to get obtain a warrant for these claims and allegations. And so then Koresh takes it upon himself, which I find to be just, honestly, why would he not, at this point? And so he and 7 other armed companions on November 3rd of 87, They go
You know
back
they
to
picked
Mount
7
Carmel.
on purpose too. It's got to be 7. It's got to be
Telling
7
you,
of
man.
us.
hmm And their goal, allegedly, was to photograph this body to gather the incriminating evidence, although none of them had a way to actually gather photographic material because none of them had a camera and none of them were actually in any way seemingly prepared for that. But Roden was informed of their existence on the property, and he just starts opening fire on on the Davidians that showed up, including Koresh. And so then a firefight breaks out on Mount Carmel. This is,
Dude,
in
these guys were
87.
legit like cowboys. Like this wasn't even that long ago, but the amount of firefights that David Koresh ends up in by the time he's dead is like, damn, dude, he's made of some real shit. I'm mad his name's not David Koresh, but that's crazy. It's crazy how often that was happening.
And especially considering that he was essentially, he had become a prophet, and he was very much, at least in the context of the group itself. So he is warning them of this imminent threat upon basically modern Babylon will come to their compound, and they will be essentially the martyrs, that will uphold, the ancient battle that will take place.
One hell of a prophet.
That's what I'm saying, because he legitimately, like in detail, warned multiple different members of the Davidian complex while they're just working on the compound. What are you going to do?
They're all gardening. He's like going up to him like,
I'm not fucking with you, man.
I know
It's one of the craziest stories ever.
We're gonna die. We're all gonna die.
I'm telling you, man. And I know that when it comes down to, oh yeah, no, I'm telling you right now, David Koresh was on another level, and especially considering the 7 seals. Like I'm desperate to sit down with David Koresh. Like all that I wanted to do after investigating this story, in this case specifically, was honestly sit down with him and see what his presentation on the 7 seals truly was.
It had to be a banger because
it had to be crazy.
He's getting people, man. Well, look,
I need to know.
We're at our time limit today. We have another show to do in like 10 minutes, but I wanted to invite you back on, Austin, and I want to do it soon because I want to do like a 2-parter for this.
David, has she hit you up? Because I had messaged Cheney. She didn't answer me back.
Not yet, but I have a lot of notifications. It might be in there somewhere. But I do think we should do a 2-parter on this because if anybody deserves it, it's the Branch Davidians. The least we could do for the bus full of children is a 2-parter episode.
Absolutely, especially since I didn't quite get to anything I intended to discuss.
Yeah, no, but
a real throwaway.
it's a hard thing, right? Because I'm telling you, I'm like, hey, tell us what the official story is, and then after that, I want you to start all the way over and tell us what your take on it. It's a big thing to unpack, and I think it does deserve a 2-parter episode. You have our calendar, Austin. I think we're light this week. Go ahead and book again, and let's make this a 2-parter. Are you down with that, Top? I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we do have to bring it in for a landing now. We got to get out, and we got to go talk to Cheney. But Austin, we're going to make this a 2-parter. Book this week, and we'll get the other half done in a couple of days. But in the meantime, where can everybody find you?
All right, guys, I appreciate you. You know this, and nothing but love and respect. So you guys, everybody can find me at the Underclass Podcast. It's basically available on all platforms. Definitely go subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the Rumble, and then follow me on Instagram at the Underclass Podcast or on Twitter at Theater Thug AWP.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you, brother. It's always a great conversation. Honestly, somebody said it in the chat, and this is not the first time we've got this, but somebody said that Austin should have a recurring series. Maybe we'll whip something up one day. But I appreciate not only you spending the time with us, but also the work that you put in. It's nice to. I'm a surface level schizo. I look at something and then I ask my gut if that resonates with me, and if my gut says yes, then I move towards it. And if it doesn't, I go, it's fucking simply not for me. So I appreciate when somebody comes along and goes, I'm going to tenaciously, probably to my own detriment, and in a way that would shock onlookers, I'm going to immerse myself in this content, and I'm going to learn everything that I can, the who, the what, the where, and the why of a situation. You do that very well, Austin. And so I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful for the work that you put in. And I hope that people will go over and support your channel. I know you said that the first time that you ever made an appearance as a speaker was on the Sam Tripoli show. And I think that's because you have a promising future ahead of you when it comes to this information. There's no longer a mainstream media, Austin. We're the mainstream media now. So we got a lot of work to do. And I think you're just the man for the job. So I just wanted to say thank you, brother. Thank you for being here.
And thank you, man. That means a lot to me.
Top, do we got anything else?
No, we'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, guys. We'll see you later. Obey, submit, and comply. Thank you, Austin.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.